Pursuant to Section 84-1412 of the Nebraska statutes,
So excited.
Okay, pursuant to Section 84-1412 of the Nebraska statutes, the public is hereby informed that a current copy of the Nebraska Open Meetings Act is located in the board meeting room on the north wall. The purpose of this meeting is to discuss the student assignment plan. Roll call, Mr. Ray, please.
Underwood.
Here.
America.
Present.
Williams.
Present.
Godding.
Here.
Wayne. Snow. Vargas. Scanlon.
Present.
Fay.
Here.
Thank you. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Ray or the research department? The research department. Okay, great. And we'll let them go through the presentation, and then when we get done, we'll hold our questions till that time. So take it away.
All right. Welcome, everybody, to the fourth Board of Education Student Assignment Plan Workshop. We just want to start by thanking the board committee members, Mr. Snow, Ms. Williams, Ms. Godding, Ms. Underwood, for their time and patience with us as we inundated them with data and to help with their decision making. Thank you all so very much. What you'll see tonight are the final recommendations of the Student Assignment Plan Committee. These recommendations are based largely on community feedback and the guidance of the board committee members. We have also included with our recommendations new information regarding costing and both the benefits and remaining challenges that exist around the provided recommendations. We'd also like to thank transportation staff for their assistance in developing costing models and for the cross-functional district staff who volunteered to assist us with the community meetings. This truly has been a project without silos. As we have long said, there is no perfect student assignment plan that solves all the problems and meets every stakeholder's expectations. There will still be people who are unhappy with the proposed new student assignment plan, and there will still be problems to address. But we feel that the new student assignment plan will meet the expectations of the needs assessment and the strategic plan that called for a more efficient plan that is simpler and easier to comprehend. It is our hope that through tonight's discussion, you will all leave with a greater understanding of the recommendations. Additionally, as the conversation unfolds, we want to hear any information that you, board members, feel is necessary for you to be able to give an up or down vote on the student assignment plan that we brought before you in May. I'll now turn things over to Mr. Todd Andrews, who will talk about the extensive outreach that occurred to invite the community to the community meetings that provided decisive information that guided the crafting of these final recommendations. Thank you, Todd.
Mr. Schmidt-Bonny, thank you. Todd Andrews from District Communications here. What you're seeing on the screen there, board members, is certainly a list of the meetings and also a partial listing of the outreach efforts that we went through to make people aware of those meetings and get them to it. Actually, is a 9-point plan as opposed to the 5 you see there. And just to go down this list really fast, first and foremost, this effort started back in February to communicate out to the people, and it started with information that was posted to the front page of the district website starting on February 25th. Thereafter, information was posted to Facebook starting the last week of February and continued to be reposted on a regular basis to remind people. Info was posted to Twitter starting the last week of February and also continued to be reposted on a regular basis. The print ads came next. First, a print advertisement in the Omaha Star, which was published March 13th. A print advertisement in El Perico, which was published March 11th. And a print advertisement in the Omaha World Herald, which was published March 17th. After that came the school messenger auto dialer call to families effort. 2 of those calls were done, first of which went out March 5th, 51,406 recipient families for that call. Student assignment plan call number 2 went out March 12th. 51,359 recipient families received that call. And again, this call reminded them of the upcoming meetings and the dates and to check out the website. After that, We had information throughout the month of March provided to our bilingual liaison to be read aloud on Radio Lobo 97.7 FM during his twice weekly appearances on the radio during that month. We have a bilingual liaison who does a marvelous job making regular appearances on that station to communicate in Spanish regarding the SAP meetings. And then finally, we are very grateful for the World Herald publishing a very large front page story previewing the SAP meetings and also the proposals, which was published in early March. So that is a more fuller delineation of the outreach effort regarding the SAP meetings. Mr. Schmidt-Bonney.
Thank you, Todd. We'll now have Mr. Jerry Corner speak briefly about the community meetings that occurred around this topic.
Jerry Corner, Coordinator of Community School and Family Engagement. So we had a total of 14 community meetings, which incorporated students, parents, teachers, and community groups. 9 of those 14 meetings were small group meetings, and then we did have the final 5 large group meetings. At those final 5 meetings, we had a total of 429 participants, which is an average of about 85 people per group. Communications. Just to support what was already happening across the district, our office did do 2 email blasts. One at the time that we determined the date of all the dates for the large group meetings, and then the week prior to our first meeting. 2 individuals from our office did do flyer handouts at multiple locations as we were in the community doing engagement work. And then we did do a large mailing to historically underrepresented areas around the metro, just to try to increase that participation. I'll pass it back to Mr. Schmidt-Bonney.
And before we get into specific recommendations by level, I'll just give some general recommendations. The Student Assignment Plan Committee recommends that work begins immediately on the creation of a website to make parents' interaction with the school choice process simpler, and that the information parents receive in this process, to make sure that information is complete and insightful. The committee also recommends that the district and interested board members review magnet and specialty schools. As a side note, I can mention that this work has already begun through the newly formed SSRR committee under the direction of Ms. Williams. I'll pass it to Chris for specific recommendations about elementary and middle school.
If you recall, to this point, we've presented 2 different student assignment plan frameworks to the Board of Education, and those frameworks were also presented to community members at the community meetings. And these 2 frameworks are the partner framework and the cooperative zone framework. Now, of these 2 models, the Student Assignment Plan Committee recommends the approval of the partner school framework at the elementary and middle school levels. The partner school framework provides transportation to a small number of schools that are relatively close to students' homes, as well as a small number of schools further away from their homes where they would likely integrate that school. And so if we take a look at the map, you'll see that a student who lives in the Sherman home attendance area here could potentially qualify for transportation to any of the schools in the dark red areas, both here and here, under this type of plan. Another example here would be if a student lives in the Joslin home attendance area there, they would qualify for transportation to any of the schools in that dark orange color. And the key here is essentially that the partner framework allows for transportation within a specific color. Now, in addition to recommending the approval of the partner framework, the Student Assignment Plan Committee also recommends eliminating the use of self-reported free and reduced lunch eligibility from the school selection process. And this means that rather than using the free and reduced lunch eligibility as indicated on the school selection form to prioritize placement of integrative students into a school, we would instead use the geographic location of a student's home. And so I'm going to take a look at the map here again. You'll notice that there's a dark line that runs basically from north to south here across the district. And essentially what that does, it divides the district into 2. And the areas on the east side of that line have free and reduced lunch percentages that are below the district average, whereas the areas on the west side of that line have free and reduced lunch percentages that are above the district average. Sorry, I flipped that around. The areas on the west side have free and reduced lunch percentages below the district average. The areas on the east side have free and reduced lunch percentages above the district average. And the prioritization of student movement across that line within those partner areas is likely to result in the socioeconomic integration of schools under this framework. And so as an example, we'll take a look here at Boyd, which is this area right here. Under this framework, any seats that remain after the placement of home attendance area students and siblings at that school go first to students living in the home attendance areas of Sherman, Minnelusa, Miller Park, Saratoga, and Lothrop. So any students that live in this red area over here. And essentially, the segregated nature of the city with respect to household income means that this type of placement prioritization at Boyd would result in socioeconomic integration of that school. Now, along with the adoption of the partner school framework and elimination of free and reduced lunch from the school selection process, the Student Assignment Plan Committee is also recommending a reduction and alignment of the walk zones at the elementary and middle school levels. Under this recommendation, the elementary walk zone would be reduced from 1.5 miles to 1.0 miles, and the middle school walk zone would be reduced from 2.0 miles to 1.5 miles. These walk zones would be the same regardless of whether a student was choosing his or her home attendance area school or any other school in the district. If you recall, an expansion of the walk to bus stop distance was suggested to help offset the cost increase associated with reduced walk zones. However, as we went out to the community, we found that a majority of community members opposed this suggestion due to safety concerns, and further analyses indicated that the resulting cost savings would be relatively small. Thus, the Student Assignment Plan Committee is recommending no change to the current walk-to-stop distance. And now we're going to tell you a little bit about the implications of these recommendations, and for that, I'll turn things back over to Scott.
Thanks, Chris. There are certainly some challenges associated with these recommendations. I'll start with the removal of free and reduced lunch from the school selection process. Changes to the priority structure from provided lunch status to geography will result in some changes to distributions of students across the district. Additionally, given that the partner plan allows for some choices that are close to home, and knowing, as Chris said, that the district is socioeconomically segregated, these close to home, likely non-integrative choices would be supported by the recommended elementary and middle school framework of the partner framework. Additionally, with the reduction of walk zones, reducing walk zones will increase the number of students who are eligible for transportation. In some instances, this will result in the need for an additional bus. This, in turn, would increase the cost to some degree. Additionally, reducing the walk zones differentially affects certain areas of the district. Specifically, schools located in smaller home attendance areas would see a much smaller benefit than those schools located in larger home attendance areas. Looking at the frameworks and the challenges associated with that, knowing that this framework reduces the number of schools available for students to make choice to, some choices that families currently are making will not be supported with transportation. It should be noted that some of those choices are going to parents who are not opting for transportation though at this time, so it may not impact them. Additionally, the types of choices families are making differ by area within OPS, as does the number of students who make choice. Knowing this, it's not surprising that the impact that this framework would have will differentially affect individuals by area. Lastly, we will still be restricting choice. We've just changed the variable that will be doing the restriction from self-reported lunch status to geography. And knowing that that will deny some parents and families the choice that they would like to make with transportation, denying anyone does create some challenges and will create some phone calls. So it's just, I want to mention that. That being said, there are many benefits associated with these recommendations as well. That's the reason for our bringing them to you. Some of the benefits with removing the free and reduced lunch status from the process include that this is the biggest complicating factor currently confronting parents and district staff as they try to explain this at the elementary and middle school level. Additionally, relying on geography should result in increased perceptions of fairness associated with the plan, as elementary and middle school students will no longer be denied access based on their parents earning too much or too little. Next, this removes a flawed and easily manipulated integration variable from the selection process. Remember, we're not talking about true lunch percentages here. We're just talking about what a person indicates on their selection form. Removing this variable from the selection process was also widely supported by the community. Looking at benefits associated with reduced walk zones, we see that this allows more students the opportunity to receive a ride to their home attendance area school. This would make attending one's home attendance area school a more attractive option for some families. This is especially true for those families who are currently making choice largely to receive transportation that family desperately needs. Additionally, this was strongly supported by the community, the reduction of these walk zones at this level. Looking at the framework and some of the benefits associated with that, we see that this simplifies the amount of choices available to families down to a reasonable number of schools. It takes away the problem where a family receives a selection form with 64 options, up to 64 options to choose from, to 8 to 10 options for which they will receive more information than they've had before to make their selection by. Additionally, this framework will make transportation more efficient and thus reduce costs. I'll now turn it over to Matt, who will talk about other recommendations.
I had to fight the crowd to get there, the group to get this one, so I'm very excited to cover high schools. Before we jump into high school, there's two things that we've also uploaded into e-meetings. That is the survey data as well as this PowerPoint, so you have access to that. And we'll also upload any of the maps that were referenced here over to the left. We'll also provide those in e-meetings as well. So the Student Assignment Plan Committee made the recommendation not to change anything at this point in high school with any sort of selection process or prioritization. Essentially, high school's working. We know that about half of our high school students currently make choice. We have the potential construction of 2 new high schools that will require us to evaluate all boundaries and all selection criteria to make choice for those 2 high schools. And then we made no change to walk zones at high schools. At the workshop, we did present you a estimate of what would look like to change the transportation to 2.5 at high school. And Mr. Wayne, I believe, pointed it out that there would be minibuses at Burke High School. And if by doing that, it creates an unpaired situation, which costs even more money to the district because you would have, by making the reduction in elementary school, you would have increased transportation at high school, and those buses would not be paired. So with that, I think I turn it over to Casey.
So I'll go ahead and try and explain a little bit of how we've done the cost estimates for these plans. Now, as Matt just suggested, not reducing the walk zone at high school allows us to take that increase in cost out of these projections. So what we are currently looking at is a current total price for transportation as well as a minimum and a maximum estimate. Now, our minimum estimates attempt to add all of the students that would be included based on new reduced walk zones at elementary school and middle school. And it attempts to only transport the students that are currently making choices that fall under the frameworks that we're suggesting. Now, we only had enough time to run estimates using one of the models. So transportation, along with us, decided that the cooperative zone model would be the best estimate to run. It's potentially the least efficient because all of the transportation would be going farther away. So I think that this minimum estimate is actually a little too low, but it's going to be a pretty good minimum estimate for what we're talking about in terms of the partner plan. So under that plan, under the minimum estimate, we are looking at about 356 total buses, which is a reduction in total buses. There are only 193 paired buses under this scenario. So you'll notice that the number of paired buses is significantly lower than the number of total buses. There's some efficiency loss in terms of that, and that's because in this scenario there are more buses at the secondary level than there are at the primary level. So there are more high school, middle school buses than elementary school buses because of the restriction based on our frameworks. That total cost for running that amount of buses would be somewhere in the neighborhood of about 17 million, 16.8 million, which would be a reduction in cost of about 4.7 million from our total cost currently. Now, I'll say that this minimum is definitely too low. Students will not continue to make choice the way they're currently doing if transportation is not provided. There'll be some families that will do that, but most families would likely adjust choice in the future to select something where transportation is provided. So simply running a minimum model where you're taking out all of the kids that don't currently match our framework does not try to account for the change in choices that people will make under a new plan. You'll notice that the students transported under this scenario is slightly less. Additionally, the cost per student, so the total cost of transportation divided by the number of students transported is lower than what we are currently sitting at, so at about $1,100 per student. Now, our maximum estimate. The maximum estimate attempts to take every student that's currently making choice, so it first adds the home attendance area, additional transportation based on the reduction in walk zones at elementary school and middle school, and then it takes every student who's making choice and it routes them to a school and transport them. So this assumption is that everyone who makes choice under a new plan will continue to make choice, and they'll do it in a way that is supported by the district frameworks. Now, I'll tell you that this estimate is probably too high. The way that people are making choice now is under a plan that allows for people to move across the district over a large distance. All of our frameworks confine that to a smaller geography. So even if the same number of students are making choice and we're transporting all of them, they're going to be more efficient. It's going to be in smaller geographic areas potentially. So while the minimum was probably too low, the maximum is probably too high. So you'll notice that under this scenario, there's 511 total buses needed. 423 of them are paired, so there's many more of them that are actually paired. An interesting note that when we took high school out of this scenario, it didn't actually reduce the number of buses, because in this scenario there are more elementary school buses than high school buses, or high school and middle school buses. So when you remove the 34 buses that the change in high school would need, you actually only removed 34 additional paired routes. You didn't remove the need for the bus itself. So under this scenario, the total cost would be somewhere in the neighborhood of $25 million. That's an increase of $3.8 million over our current transportation costs. The number of students transported goes up dramatically to over 22,000 students, and our cost per student is in line with the minimum estimate at about $1,100 per student. So some of the other things that we learned as we analyzed transportation and we looked at other school districts across the country. Currently, OPS has two different start times. So in general, you have one start time for secondary school, high school, and middle school, and one start time for elementary school. In almost all of the school districts that we looked at, we found significant differences in the cost per student, or the cost for each individual student to transport them at districts. From what I can tell, most of that is made up for by the fact that most districts triple tier their buses. So they have 3 different start times. Many of them have one middle school and high school start time, and they split their their elementary school start times into 2. But there are many variations to that model in the research that we did in talking to transportation departments across the country. So this practice, as I said, is utilized by a lot of urban school districts. I think we looked at 8 of them, and all of them utilize this practice. The cost savings potential here is quite large. If pairing a bus currently saves on average about $35,000 per bus, if you can add an additional route to that same bus, you can use it 3 times as opposed to only using it twice, or in some cases only 1 time. Additionally, when we looked at our cost of special education transportation, so kind of the other half of our total transportation budget, we look to be kind of out of the norm in terms of that cost. Some of the reasons for that, some districts contract all of their buses. Some districts do all of their buses in-house. There are many districts who are putting students that have special education needs on the same bus as regular education students. In some cases, we have IEPs that are requesting the students have 1 bus, so that's a pretty inefficient way to transport 1 student. So there's potentially a number of things that we could do in that arena for transportation costs. And then finally, one of the really interesting things that we learned when we had transportation run the reduction in walk zones was that in some cases, we can actually add students to our routes currently for no additional cost. We have a 1.5 walk zone at elementary school. In some cases, you can pick up the additional students added by moving that down to 1 mile without adding an additional bus. So as we see it, we should be maximizing our ability to transport students in the buses that we currently have. And so trying to find a way to implement some sort of open seat policy where we're using as many of our seats on our buses as we can to provide transportation to students, we think would be potentially not cost savings, but much more efficient in terms of the use of our dollars. Now, it comes with a lot of complications in terms of how you do that. I don't know how you communicate effectively. The walk zone is 1 mile, but we can transport you as well because there's seats on the bus. But I think it only makes sense for us to attempt to use our dollars more effectively.
So with that, that concludes the presentation and recommendations. Next steps is to get information from you and to bring forth a recommendation for a student assignment plan, either by grade level or any of the other recommendations that we've brought forth. And then the work of the detail starts to play out. We have to figure out the details of all the other parts of this that have to be pulled off in order to get this implemented for the 17-18 school year. So again, our current timeline is to come to the board on May 18th with a proposed action item for the student assignment plan.
I want to thank Mr. Ray and the research department for all of the work that they did in helping us pull the information together, and for actually some of those additional things that you did on researching what other urban districts are doing, and some of the opportunities where we could find some cost savings and some just some different ways of thinking. The triple tiering had not been something that I had thought of before. So I want to thank you. We've been doing this for over a year now, and it's been great. I'm going to actually turn it over to Mrs. Underwood first to make a few comments. She's been the committee chair on this, and even though she's been a little busy for the last month, she played a significant role in helping this work to move along.
Yeah, I am still just kind of trying to clear the cobwebs and get caught up on a couple things. I did review the PowerPoint before the meeting, and I like where the recommendations are going. I was a fan of the partner school framework for a long time, and I also felt that it was very appropriate to leave the high school piece out for now. There's just so many moving pieces with high school, not the least of which, we'll hopefully have 2 new high schools within 4 or 5 years. So I feel like whatever we did at the high school level, we would have to update it, in a relatively short amount of time. So that's where I'm at. Like Ms. Godding said, I also appreciate research kind of looking into the other school districts and looking at other potential cost savings. And I think having the hard kind of dollar amounts for minimums and maximums really helps out a lot to give us a feel for what we're looking at and how to respond to our constituents when they ask us questions related to transportation costs. I did have a specific question for Casey on the open seat policy. Could you explain that? I think I missed out on, or I just missed that explanation. Is that basically picking up kids who are outside of the walk zone after after the bus goes through the initial routing?
Yeah, it's most effective at picking up students in the home attendance area because, where students are living are pretty confined in terms of its location to the school. Again, when we went through dropping the walk zones and determined how many additional students we were adding in terms of moving from 1.5 miles to 1 mile, in some cases the numbers that transportation run suggested that there were no additional buses needed to do that. So from that perspective, why would we not attempt to transport those students if we can do it for the same amount of dollars? Now, it certainly creates complications in terms of how you communicate that and at what point you do draw a line. But I think there's some potential there to, to provide more transportation. The way we've thought of it is that maybe you have a guideline. If it's 1 mile, you you route everything at 1 mile, and then you see what you can do additionally beyond that. And it's almost like a value-added transportation. So we have additional students that can be transported for no additional cost after we've run our main plan. It creates some complication, but it potentially adds some efficiency.
Thank you. One of the other things that I wanted to mention that we're just going to have to keep in mind, I don't know that it needs to be part of the vote on May 18th, but we are going to have to be, just to remind my board colleagues, we're going to have to keep in mind grandfathering and how much of that we want to continue to do, because I think currently we're not only grandfathering from a previous student assignment plan to the current one, but maybe even the one from before that. So that's just something that we're going to need to keep in mind, and that's going to, it's going to be a difficult decision to make as far as how we handle that. So I think that's all I have for now.
Great, thank you. I think we'll just go around the table, and so Lacey, if you want to share anything you have to say.
Fabulous, that works perfectly. I guess I had one question when I was going through everything before our meeting today, and that was actually related to high school, ironically enough. I know when we had originally started the conversation about changing the walk zones, et cetera, for high school, part of the discussion was adding transportation for students outside the walk zone within the home attendance area for the schools that we don't currently provide that for. And I didn't see any mention of that in here. I saw that we're not going to change the walk zone part, but not if we were leaving in the recommendation to provide those students outside the walk zone with transportation, or if we were continuing our current policy.
I would say that this doesn't include that kind of look at the plan, but you could look at things like the open seat policy to perhaps address some of those issues, if I'm understanding.
I'm thinking specifically, obviously, of Bryan and what's the other school? Burke, where you can't get transportation if you're in the home attendance area, regardless of how far away you live. Because that is a point of concern that's been brought up to me multiple times by our families.
Right. No, thank you very much for that, because I think as we got into the discussion about triple tiering, there may be, so we definitely need to add that back to the, is there that opportunity once we get into this further? Ms. Williams.
Well, being on the committee, I'm fully aware of the plan and have sat through all of the data. And so the only thing I really want to add to the conversation is to Mrs. Underwood's point, the grandfathering piece, is that we are really trying to get this kind of moving and figure out what our plan is so that we can start letting families know what we're going to do with grandfathering, if it's going to stop in 16-17 or 17-18 or wherever, so that as families are making choices, they're well aware in advance of what's going to happen once this current plan comes into place. So I also want to thank the research team. You've been fabulous, and the transportation, because running those numbers is no easy feat, and they were in a few meetings and really wanted to be a part of this. And get the clarity for the things that we're asking. And I'm really excited to even look at these preliminary numbers and say that, if we add $3 million, but we're also able to transport almost 7,000 more students, what a benefit for our district, and how many more families are we providing safe transportation to and from school. So that's very exciting to me. And I eagerly await when we are building those 2 new high schools to really come back and have this conversation about the high schools.
Well, I would concur with both the comments that Mrs. Underwood and Ms. Williams had, and having sat through a year's worth of data and a lot of data on the information that we got in front of us. We didn't take these recommendations lightly. We really reviewed what families in different parts of the city said. I really appreciate, and I want to go back to saying thanks to Casey for all the great map constructing, because we did hear from families in specific parts of the city that they really wanted that choice close to home, but they also wanted that choice and that opportunity to attend a school further from home. And so I really appreciate his efforts and all of you for putting together the partner school framework for us in that regard. And I think I've been pretty clear on the high school piece as far as where I've stood. I've not changed from that. I think knowing that half of our students make choice and that we are currently have a lot of change happening in our high schools. We've got some exciting things happening at Benson with the new programs that we have going on there that'll start this fall. We're seeing Northwest to the point where it's really within 150 students of being full. And so we've got some really exciting things that have been happening, and I think it'll be good for those schools just to stabilize and have the growth and the experience that will allow us in a few years to make bigger choices as we bring 2 new schools on. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Snow.
Thank you. I have no comment. I just want to commend you guys for all the work you've done and the research. Some of our meetings were very long, and there was a lot of research that went into that, and I just want to thank you guys for being honest and forefront with everything that was presented to us, and appreciative. Thank you.
I appreciate all the hard work. I was slightly confused. You were recommending the partner model, but the cost estimate you said was based off of the cooperative?
That's correct. Essentially, there was no time to run both models. I would suggest that the number of schools available to each student in both scenarios or in both frameworks is essentially the same. The partner model is likely more efficient because some of the transportation or half of the transportation for choice students would be close to home. So that's why we chose for them to run the cooperative zone model, because it is the kind of the maximum distance that buses would have to go, the most time they'd have to spend. So running it under the zone framework gave us kind of our highest low estimate, I guess, is the best way to say it.
That concerns me just for the transparency aspect of what we're trying to do, not projecting the numbers. I understand maybe in the middle, but I think if we're making this big of a decision, we should have a cost estimate in front of us. I just have concerns about the high school level. I think not making changes at the high school level fundamentally impacts North and South Omaha's choices. If we remove the words social economic, or we remove the words free and reduced lunch, and we talk about race, this board wouldn't be comfortable doing it and maintaining this policy, even though the effect of the policy is still the same, that certain schools are denying 2/3 African Americans, 75% Hispanics into certain schools based off of free and reduced lunch. I think it should be this board's position that no matter where a kid lives and what socioeconomic background they come from, they have equal access to any school that is available to them. And that concerns me. So underneath the current plan, will Burke still maintain a set aside for 50 students who are full pay? Which is an odd question because no other school has that set aside.
Yeah, I'm thinking of the best answer for you. We haven't discussed changes of any school selection criteria for next school year, but it is definitely something that we can look at. I think we'll have to look at Northwest as well and how many students we approved there. So it's all related, but that doesn't mean that we can't change how we do school selection and how many seats we fill and the criteria we use in those 50 seats at Burke High School.
And so just help me understand the free and reduced lunch practical aspects. What schools does that really affect if we change? If we were to change that provision and get rid of it like we were asking to do with the elementary and middle schools, what are the real effects of that? What practically changes at what schools? Or how many schools?
So the two schools that would impact would be Burke and, well, three schools, excuse me, Burke, South, and Central. Because there are caps at those schools, at a school, for instance, like North High School, everyone gets in. So your full gamut of applicants, regardless of what the socioeconomic mix of them are, get into the school. So fundamentally, it would be Burke, Central, and South.
So we're going to maintain a policy that helps potentially 3 schools, but we're also going to maintain a policy that pushes kids away from their home attendance high schools, such as Benson and Northwest. And this was brought up multiple times in these meetings regarding if my daughter is on 48th and Ames and I have a house there, she's not walking to Benson at 6:30 at night. If my daughter's on 120th and Fort, she's not crossing the interstate to walk to Northwest as a freshman. So we're maintaining policy to benefit 2 or 3 schools, but we're not creating policy to help those schools in a student transportation plan. And that's where I'm kind of breaking down with whether to support this plan or not, is because if we're going to single out and help certain schools for whatever reason, then we should also help those schools or have flexibility to help those schools, same as Brian, what Ms. Merica just spoke about, to help that school too. I don't like the idea of a top-down approach like this. I like some more flexibility, and if we're going to have flexibility, we should address Benson, Northwest, and Brian's concerns about transportation. And I know we may get to that later, but if we're providing a recommendation, I think, and if we're going to vote on it, that concerns me. And it really concerns me that we are limiting choice for arguably the voiceless, the kids in poverty, the kids who need us the most, by saying, and the numbers don't lie, I mean, everybody got the numbers, that these kids are being denied because we have a free and reduce policy. I think all the challenges and benefits in elementary and middle school pertain to the same thing at the high school level. We're going to build new elementary schools. We're going to have to come back and visit it at that point. We're going to build a new middle school. We're going to have to come back and visit it at that point. So I don't see why we shouldn't do it. And because the board got the notice of the impact of race regarding this decision, we are now on notice. You can call it social economics, you can call it free and reduced lunch, but to me, institutional racism. If the impact is still that big, we as a board should do something to address it, because it is a big impact. And that's what concerns me the most.
Mr. Scanlon.
Well, I like the ability to provide, excuse me, more transportation to more students, because that's obviously what we've identified before, is that students are or parents are choosing schools based off of what's allowed for the transportation. So I think that's a key issue to help building the neighborhood schools, is to provide more transportation for those neighborhoods kids. The open seat policy, I think that should be taken a look at to make that makes sense if somebody's along a bus route and they live within that walk zone or slightly within that walk zone. A bus stopping to pick them up is not an added burden, I don't think. And I also, perhaps for some of those high schools that have lower attendance numbers, maybe we allow open seat for, say, Benson, Bryan, the other schools in Northwest that would allow those students transportation that are in dangerous areas, whether it's traffic or due to high crime areas. So I think that's definitely something worth taking a look at.
Is that it? Thank you so much. Mrs. Fay?
I had a question about cost on slide 10. Is there any, I had the same question Justin had about maybe prior to the vote, will you have time, do you think, in the next 3 weeks to run the other, or is it?
I'm going to tell you that transportation probably does not have time. I know they're routing for summer school. What this essentially requires is a rerouting of the entire district.
Okay.
The issue with transportation cost, unfortunately, especially when these buses are paired, is determining which students you pick up on which buses, where those buses end up, and then what bus or what route that bus can turn around and do. And so it's kind of the whole package comes together to give you your total price. Honestly, I would tell you that the cost difference will not be that much, and frankly, a spread of about $7 million is a pretty big minimum and maximum to look at in terms of total cost change. We can certainly investigate if transportation can run them. I'm going to guess they're probably not going to have time within the next 3 weeks.
So thank you. When you were looking at other districts, I know that because of the unique nature of each school district, it's impossible to run an apples-to-apples comparison of our transportation plans, or even our current transportation plan, and compare it to another district's. But even just understanding it's probably not scientifically accurate, just cost per student, are we able to have any comparables there?
No, essentially we're higher than all the districts that we looked at in terms of cost per student for our general education students. As you noted, the difficulty with comparing us to other school districts, you have what kind of student assignment plan do they have? What kind of walk boundaries do they have? Do they triple tier? So do they have 3 different start times? How are they contracted, or is everything in-house? How do they deal with their special education transportation?
Okay.
All of those play in. So essentially, we are higher than all of the other school districts. I would suggest that most of that is due to the fact that they are all triple tiering their buses.
Okay.
Now, I would say potentially changing start times at schools could be an uphill battle, if you will. Maybe even more difficult than what we're doing now. But I'm going to say this, and I don't want to say that it's going to happen, but we could potentially, add all of the walk zones that we talked about, and transport the kids we're currently transporting, and triple tier our buses to a maximum effect, and potentially save money. Now, the student assignment plan can really only impact transportation costs to a degree. We've attempted to, I think, impact it to a pretty high degree, just short of going to home attendance area only in terms of no choice in the district. If you really want to impact it, I think your overall, the best way to do that is to use those buses more. And that would require having three start times. However you do it, it would require being able to triple tier those buses.
Well, okay, good. We won't get into triple tiering anymore today, but I appreciate learning about it. Do these estimates, these just include regular transportation, right?
That's
not
correct.
Special education is not factored into this.
Right.
Right.
So the
okay.
student assignment plan is not attempting to change anything.
Right. I mean, well, because you referenced that we have a higher overall cost, and special education being so I just wanted to make it clear that this does not include special education.
Right.
I think the only other thing I would say about the open seat policy, because I understand probably some of the logistical issues of just how you communicate that and everything, but that's for lack of a better phrase, I'm sure there's an educational phrase that's equal to customer service, but that's what that is, and that's just part of what we do, I think, to make students and families welcome to the Omaha Public School, is we work out difficult problems like that. And, we can do that. So if it gets more kids more efficiently on buses and gets them to school safely, then I'm sure we can figure out a way to work that out, given time. So thank you for making it a suggestion.
Mr. Ray.
I did want to point out that we've been directed by the Student Assignment Plan Subcommittee board members to meet separately to look at special education transportation as well. So that is another discussion that we're in the process of completing.
Mr. Evans, do you have any comments?
First, I want to thank the staff, too, and Mr. Ray included, for all the effort. Clearly, a lot of energy has been invested in this, and the board, too. School board members have spent a lot of time and energy, and I think sometimes people forget they're volunteers. No one up here that's serving on the board is paid for this, and yet they're putting in a lot of hours. So I think our community needs to know that. In relationship to the recommendations, no matter what you decide, truly, you can't answer everything. I know you started out with that comment, and people can interpret it as institutional racism if they want to, or they can interpret it as trying not to create more segregation, because that's actually what you do if you change the plan. So it's a tough one. I mean, those are not easy for any district. They're not easy here, but I don't think anyone has any ill intent, and I think everyone's trying to figure out how can we do this in the most effective and efficient way to create something that makes sense to parents and makes sense to us. But it's not easy, and it won't answer everything. So no matter where we decide on it, it's kind of like boundaries with when you do open up new schools. No matter where you draw that line, somebody's not happy. It's impossible, and I've lived through that in a couple of the districts too, so that's not fun either. But eventually you have to draw a line, and you try to put some logic and reason behind it, and so you've really tried to put some really thoughtful analysis here, and I appreciate everyone's effort.
I don't know if anyone has any additional thoughts or new information they want to share, but otherwise I want to thank you all for being here and presenting the information to us, and thank the community for those members who came out this evening. I appreciate that, and we'll look forward to seeing this come back then in front of the board. Obviously, if anyone has any questions that they want more research on that we can do, I know the transportation cost thing, and I refer back to Mrs. Fay's question, and we talked about it a long time, and it's really hard, and we also don't know the choice that people will make once the plan goes into effect, whatever the plan is. So that does make it challenging, but I do thank everyone for being here, and the meeting is adjourned at 6:24 p.m. Thank you.